All right, I'd like to say hello, everybody. And the name of this video is going to be What is Recovery? Yeah, what is recovery? Somebody tell me what recovery is. Because I got about 7, 8 videos out. And I was going through the steps. I had to take a step back because I talked about addiction. I talked about what made up addiction, and I put my topics up under recovery. But I never defined what recovery was, and so I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna ask the question: what is recovery? And if you go to a dictionary, it's gonna say something like recovery is going back to a starting point, or rebuilding, you know. And so my question is, what am I recovering from, or what is recovery? Am I recovering from drugs or alcohol or food or sex or gambling or shopping or the lifestyle? What is this recovery thing? What is recovery? Okay, and I just kind of like define that, going back from a starting point. But is it because of the drugs? Was it because of alcohol? Was it because of sex or gambling? You know, uh, in other videos, I talked about the symptoms of addiction. I talked about the symptoms of addiction, and some of those I just mentioned. Uh, is that what I'm recovering from? Am I recovering from some type of a symptom? And I describe what I just mentioned, sex, uh, drugs, gambling, eating, working, uh, addicted to drama. Is that what I'm recovering from? And I say no. I still say that those are symptoms of a bigger problem. And then I had defined what addiction was, and I said addiction is obsessive and compulsive and total self-centered behavior that is manifested through the symptoms. And it's the symptoms that indicate that a person has an addiction. And what the addiction does is it takes the person apart, or it destroys them, or cause them to hit what in the recovery community is what's called a bottom. And it's on 4 levels: mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, which are the makeup of the human being. I'm made up of a physical me, a mental me, an emotional me, and a spiritual me, and all that put together is the human. So when I say, what am I recovering from, or what is recovery? Recovery is the put back together, or the going back to the starting point, or even the new beginning of the person that's been or hit a bottom or been destroyed by their symptoms. that's manifested through the addiction, obsessive and compulsive and total self-centered behavior. And I say total self-centered behavior because not all self-centered behavior is total. So I'm gonna take my little headphones off and I'm gonna get going. But I like to hear myself with the headphones on. So if it's all right if I keep my headphones on for a minute, I'm gonna put my headphones on for a minute because I'm in my basement and I'm listening to the air conditioner furnace. So anyway, getting back, this is what I'm recovering from. I recover at the level of feelings and emotions that have been traumatized through some type of traumatic event at some point in my life. There was a trauma that happened to me that wrecked my feelings. That took my feelings and my emotions or caused me not to want to feel my feelings and my emotions. Then I went to some type of a symptom to repair myself mentally, physically, spiritually, and or emotionally. That's what happened. And so in the recovery process, I may have went through various places outside of myself to get some healing. I might have went to a recovery program, or I might went into a treatment center. I could have went to church, a psychiatrist, and various other places to get some type of a healing for myself. However, I may have thought, and which I did in the beginning, that I was recovering from symptoms. And, and the symptoms I named: alcohol, drugs, sex, overeating, gambling, fantasy. Oh, can't forget the fantasy. Fantasy. And then the list can go on and on and on. And so what happened was, by me exhibiting these symptoms and getting so caught up and entangled in these symptoms, that I thought that it was the symptom that was taking apart my life. When in all actuality and reality, it was not the symptom. It was my unable to deal with my feelings and emotions. Because like I said, I was traumatized at a point that I didn't want to feel anymore, or the thought of that traumatic event took me to a place where emotionally I couldn't handle it, mentally I couldn't handle it, spiritually I couldn't handle it. So it manifested in the physical form. So here's a question: what was I, or who was I before the traumatic event? Now that's a question that an individual is going to have to answer on their own. Because some people have traumatic events that they're born into. Some people can have a traumatic event starting at 7, 8, 9, and then some may not have a traumatic event until they're past adolescence, around 21, 22. And then some people into adulthood. So it'll be based on the individual. My first traumatic event for me was, I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents was breaking up. And I remember that clearly. And I was probably like 4 or 5. Parents was breaking up, and I'm witnessing the event that was going on before me. And I really didn't know, but I know that, Dad left and Mom was crying. And, I was like, whoa, Mom was crying. And I knew at that age that crying was not always good, because why? I cried. And when I cried, it was based on, I wasn't happy about whatever it was. So therefore, that was my first traumatic event. And then other events started taking place. start happening in my life. So spiritually and mentally and physically and emotionally at a very young age, I had experienced trauma. Now, what was I before that? When I was a child, I was a kid. And it's clear it's okay to say that a child, and I'm gonna leave the religious dogma out of it, but it's okay to say that a child that age is in their innocence. They're innocent. They don't know too much about good or bad, naughty or nice, So at an early age, I'm a child experiencing trauma that stunted a growth. And then what came behind that? What came behind that is, my mom going through whatever she was going through, I'm living with her and, she got this heartbreak. So therefore I got a heartbreak because I'm attached to my mother. Now I don't know what my father's going through because he's not there. So I can't really comment on that. So I'm going through these events. I got family, I got a brother, he's going through it too. So early on, I see a lot of stuff that I don't understand, but, my feelings and my emotions are stunned. And at some point, my spirit, me mentally and me emotionally, my growth is stunted, but not in the physical. Physical, I'm still eating, I'm growing up. But at the time, I'm living in anger and resentment that this person, my mother's going through. So I'm catching that. I'm catching that anger. I'm catching that resentment. I'm catching that fear. Very strong emotions, very, very powerful emotions. And when I say I'm experiencing that, that affected the love that my mom shared, was sharing with me. And I'm not saying she didn't love me. I'm saying there was an effect there because when a person is going through what? Resentment, anger, fear, and grief, then those emotions, those strong emotions are disseminated as they emanate from that person. They're disseminated for whatever, for whom and whatever is in that environment. So that's what I experienced. And I like to say, I am sharing some fourth step material. So what happens? I'm growing up and I'm starting at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm growing up in resentment. I'm growing up in anger. I'm growing up in fear. I'm growing up in lack of love, lack of attention. This is the type of energy that's been emanating and I'm receiving. So another word, it's safe to say, is I'm growing up in a abusive situation. And when I say abusive, I mean the person, my caregiver, what they're feeling, they're passing on to me. And I'm not just like stating a blame game or nothing like that. I'm just like stating what's happening when I'm talking about the recovery process. So as time go on and I witness my caregiver not only going through these feelings, going through these emotions, but how they medicated their feelings and emotions and what they use to stabilize and calm themselves down. So we talking about anything from food, cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, um, television, fantasy, all these symptoms appeared from this individual, and in tune, I was a recipient. So therefore, I inherited some of those feelings. I inherited some of those emotions. Not some, a great deal. I inherited a lot of stuff just by being a child open. So what started happening was I began to develop my own addiction. And my first addiction, I never will forget, was fantasy. I talked about that in one of my earlier videos. And to plug myself, my name is Suni, S-U-N-I. My last name is Sami, S-A-M-I. And if you put that in the YouTube search engine, a lot of my videos will pop up. And, I'm pretty new at this, so I'm trying to learn how to get them up under 12-step recovery. And that's a process right there for me. So anyway, moving on with this thing. So a lot of my addiction, I inherit. I never learned how to express emotions in a healthy manner. I never learned how to feel in a quote-unquote healthy manner. So from a young age, I was retarded. And then, like I said a few minutes ago, I developed my first symptom or my first drug, and that was fantasy. As a result, I invented characters, like little invisible friends, and I also became codependent, which in other words, me feeling what mom felt, I tend to feel sorry for her. But at some point, and then there was a range of emotions that I had went through as a youth concerning my mother, as I witnessed her going through her feelings and her emotions. I began to feel sad and mad, and then there was some anger. So as a result of this relationship, and this was my first relationship, as a result of this relationship, it's safe to say that from a very early age, not only was I start nurturing in addiction or being nurtured by addiction, I became retarded in my feelings and my emotions. Then at the same time, growing up in a society where it was said that men or boys were not supposed to show their emotions. Boys was not supposed to show their emotions. Then that also compounded on top of what I was already going through. Yeah. So by the time I, became like 12, 13, I started mimicking some of the behavior that I had grew up in, or that I was affected by. So I started smoking cigarettes by the time I was 12 years old. And I smoked the cigarettes because, that's what Mom did. Mom smoked, she smoked Pall Malls, and eventually I wanted to try one, so I tried one. She drank, and eventually I started drinking. Then by the time, I hit the streets, and then the boys and the girls I was growing up with, they started doing things, and I started doing things. And then home was a place that I never wanted to be because, number one, there was a lot of resentment, there was a lot of anger there, and it was expressed. a lot of mixed emotions, shall I say. There was a lot of mixed emotions that was transferred from my caregiver unto me. So basically, I was learned to be unhealthy, and I was full of pain by the time I got to 12. So this goes back to my question. It says like, well, what is recovery? And then what am I recovering from? Well, I just talked about what I was recovering from. But what was I before recovery? And what I was before recovery, and I'm gonna have to go with the generic societal approach. I mean, I was pretty much innocent. I was a victim of circumstances that got caught up in something that I didn't have nothing to do with. Nothing to do with. And then as a result of wanting to be loved and feel loved and that type of stuff, and I really don't want to say stuff, but never receiving, any proper nurturing or good nurturing or examples of nurturing. And that's how I grew up. But I did know one thing from watching TV, what I thought that should be, that type of nurturing should be. I'm going to go ahead and take my headphones off now. Kind of like hurting my ears. Take a little sip of my tea. So what happened was, as a result, I looked at the TV, or I looked at everything outside of me for emotional support, mental support, physical support, and spiritual support. And I went to church and joined the choir and was an altar boy, and I had friends that I thought was better than me anyway. And I sought relationships in the streets, but the bottom line is I never really had a template of how certain thing, how, number one, to establish relationships, the mechanics of relationships, and the morals and values of relationships. I just wanted to be in some type of relationship. But I never knew that everything started with self. I always looked for stuff outside of me. And even today, at 66 years old and being in recovery for a while, I understand that recovery is the inside job. So anyway, after a while, and going through my symptoms, my addictive symptoms, searching for something on the outside that was really on the inside, I hit a bottom. And so it had a lot to do with, drugs and alcohol and food and sex and so forth and so forth. So anyway, getting back on topic of recovery and what is recovery. So my inventory, and I'm talking about this 4-step inventory, the history that I just laid out is that history. And so I'm basically verbalizing what a 4-step inventory is. Let me take my crystal out. I like my crystals. So I'm basically doing a verbal inventory of of my recovery and how my addiction developed and how I used symptoms. And the symptoms were what I learned were or are our factors is, let me know when my addiction is what? Is active. It's when the addiction is active. So addiction have been described as obsessive and compulsive, total self-centered behaviors. Where did these behaviors come from? Well, the exact nature, as talked about in the 5th step, came from when I was a little kid, 3, 4 years old. Now, I gotta say this. And I know when people hear these stories, they tend to point to somebody else like a significant other, or they'll point to their brother or somebody like that. But really, if you identify with what I'm saying, it's you that I'm talking about. You really identifying with me. So anyway, moving on, what is recovery? Recovery is going back to a starting point of your innocence on a mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional level that you can remember. Because I do remember, like I said, the breakup. But what do I remember before the breakup? I'm going to say this. There's certain things that I do remember even before that. I remember I do remember some things, but the traumatic event that I'm talking about is the one that's highlighted in my mind to most, because there were certain things about that event that I never will forget. And I'm not going to go into that right now because it's not important at this point in the series of videos that I'm gonna put out, and I hope to put out at least 30 or 40 of them, because that's how intense it is, and my journey through recovery, and I'm still on the journey. I'm still on my journey. So I just talked about what I'm recovering from. And let me just put it, if I could put it in a couple words, I'm recovering from a broken heart. But it's not my broken heart, it's somebody else's. It's somebody else's pain, somebody else's emotions, somebody else's feelings that I contracted as a minor. Yeah. Now, there's a word for that. There's a word. So the word I'm saying is that at an early age, I was empathic. I was an empath. Because I do remember trying to, calm, my caregiver down and assure them everything is all right. And that was the development of the codependence. So remember, addictive people, they have, statistically, have what is called codependent behaviors. Codependent is when I try to give care to a person who's, when I'm, let's say, feeling sorry for somebody, but I over feel sorry for them. I put a lot of emotion into it, a lot of feeling into it, and to the point that I want to make them well. I want to make them feel better. That is codependent behavior. So early on, I was a codependent. Now, a component of codependent behavior is empathic behavior, because the empath has to have a certain amount of codependency to feel what another person is feeling. Now, like they say, if that don't resonate with you, fine. If you can't identify with that, fine. But if you do, that's cool, you know. But I'm just trying to break this down, or educate, or just give my perspective, what I call my perspective. Because in these series of videos, I am going to a place with this stuff that I'm talking about. And the place that I'm going, I'm just going to put it out there right now. I'm talking about third dimension behavior that's moving, that's, and when I say third dimension, I mean very simply, dimension that's what we call it, earthly, worldly behavior. So just look at it like that. I'm looking at the development, or I'm explaining the development of my worldly behavior and how I got involved in that, and the direction that I'm going is from the third dimension to the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension. And these dimensions that I'm talking about are spiritual planes. But I'm starting off from earth. Then I'm going to, which is the third. Then I'm going to the fourth. Then I'm going to the fifth. So let me back down. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, because I want to walk the individual through this, what I'm talking about. Now, understand this. From my perspective, when a person comes to the 12-step program and they start working steps and they start working traditions and they start extracting the principles of the steps, and also what the fellowships give or offer, or what a person extracts from the fellowship, is not only spiritual in nature. And I'm saying, once you start experiencing long-term recovery, what is long-term recovery? I'm gonna say 15 years. Once you're in the recovery process consistently for 15 years plus, you start experiencing different levels of recovery. That's right. Now, I have to add, certain experiences or recovery experiences the individual has to experience before as they ascend to the levels that I'm talking about. So I'm gonna say sponsorship. A person should be sponsored and then sponsor others. And that can come through individual, or that can come through study families or step study groups or families. But it has to be consistent, very consistent. Consistent in the step process. Drink some of my tea here. Because it's the fellowship and it's the groups that's going to allow the individual the freedom to express themselves in a recovery environment. And that's how, I'll put it like this, it's like you go home, you read some lessons, and then you go to school. And then when you go to school, you lay out the lessons that you learn. And then your instructor and then your schoolmates, they help you translate what you've learned and filter through what you've learned. And that's the recovery process. that's a part of the recovery process when going to meetings, when being involved in recovery oriented programs. And when I say recovery, I say in anything that's involved inside the 12-step. When I say 12-step, AA, NA, FACA, OAGA, Overeaters, Gamblers, Sex Anonymous, because they have their way of dealing with their membership. So anyway, moving on, and I'm gonna say this, my talks probably they won't last the topics won't last probably no more than an hour a night. So anyway, moving on, going into the different levels of recovery, and I must add too, like when I just talked about the different dimensions, also included on those dimensions is your preachers and your imams and your people that get off into different types of meditation and yoga and everything don't have to be religious. It can be philosophical or wherever that person go to. Because understand that the 12-step program is not a religious program, but from my perspective, it's designed to turn out spiritual people. And spiritual people, from my experience, can step through any door because they equipped with three basic principles from the 12-step experience that will allow them to sit, stand, or lay in any situation. And they are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Yes, because everybody can't be honest. And when I say honest, I don't mean telling the truth. Telling the truth is only a component of being honest. When a person is honest, okay, telling the truth is the verbal expression. It's only a verbal expression. That's why when you go to court and they have you raise your hand, they say, do you swear to tell the whole truth? To tell the truth. But honesty, if you look at it from a recovery perspective, is a verbal admission along with the behavior. So it's two components to being honest. One is verbal, and then the other part is the behavior. Telling the truth is just only being verbal. Something you just gonna say. So being open or open-minded, when we say open-minded, means very simply not to be so much judgmental, however it means to be objective. That's all it is. You can maintain your own point of view or whatever it is, but listening to somebody else. And when you listen to somebody else, that lays the ground to be what? Empathetic. For sure. So then there's this willingness. The other one is the willingness. And inside that willingness, inside the recovery situation, is to be willing to do the other two. To be willing to be honest and be willing to be open-minded. Now you can take that and you could apply that willingness to anything else, but in the recovery situation, that's what the willingness is. So with these three spiritual principles that we learn inside the 12-step experience, and I'm not saying it's exclusive to the 12-step experience, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, but And most literature, and most 12-step literature that you read in, for example, AA or NA, it's written. Say, for example, in the big book, it says honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And then it says some people will not be able to be honest. We call them the what? The unfortunate. But they can what? Get sober. In NA, it says, with honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, we are what? We are well on our way. Well on our way to what? Into the recovery process. But you have to have some type of tolerance for the what? The indispensable. That's what they're called. They're called the indispensable. So moving on with this, when the recovering person first inventory themselves with the indispensables, and that's what I'll call them, when they start doing that, they're able to what? To sit down somewhere or lay down somewhere or however the recovery process is done and apply those spiritual principles in their lives. But what's happening is the foundation is being formed for some other principles. But you got to have those three. So here we go. So let's take a little cap and drink some of my tea, right? So what's happening is, inside the recovery, the program is forming and fashioning the recovery person for something. And in each step that the recovery person go through, you're headed in certain direction, but you're headed in a specific direction. This program is taking you somewhere and it's going to do something with you. But first, the individual has to let go of certain things. And that certain things is, and I like, in one philosophy, it's called the pain body. That's the pain, the emotional pain, the mental pain, the spiritual pain, and it's manifested physically. It's manifested physically. So spiritual pain, emotional pain, and mental pain is what? It's always manifested in the physical sense. When I say manifested physical, depends on what your primary symptoms are. They will, if you, like, for example, if you're a person and you doing drinking, say you drink a lot, alcohol is your primary symptom. Then eventually the effects of alcohol is going to manifest physically on you. Same way with drugs. You know, you out here, you smoking meth, or you doing heroin, or I smoking weed, whatever drug that you have, that drug is going to manifest, that symptom is going to manifest in the physical. It's going to manifest in all four areas, but it will be seen physically, like sex. That can manifest. And how would that manifest? I mean, a person could catch a disease or a virus. It manifests like that. So inside the symptom, let me back up a little bit. So talking about the pain body, or the pain that, I got allergies. So when I be picking at my nose, my allergies is tickling my nose. When I be bumping my glasses, that means I'm pushing them up on my nose. So anyway, moving on, inside the pain or the pain body is the manifestation of the pain that the individual carries. And the pain is mental, spiritual, and emotional pain. Right. A lot of that pain that I was talking about is a result of resentment, anger, fear. Resentment, anger, and fear. Those are very powerful negative feelings that the individual, that an individual addict or individual carries as a result of trauma or a traumatic event. One of the or I ain't gonna say one, the most significant symptom that the addict also carries one called denial. And inside denial, what happens is that the person will actually deny that they have a problem. Not only would they have a problem with their primary symptoms, but they have a problem on the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional level. Regardless to what has been evident in their lives, unable to maintain relationships. You might see a person go from relationship to relationship to relationship, or you could see a person that's very unstable in their mental capacity, spiritually. And what I'm talking about is behaviors. I'm not saying what was coming out of a person's mouth. I'm saying what the behaviors translate. And the behaviors translate on the spiritual side. I mean, they could probably talk, good morals and values and stuff like that. But what their behaviors will say something totally different. Because remember, addicts, for the most part, or addictive personalities, for the most part, are very good talkers. Yeah. If you notice, one thing about people with addictive personalities, they can talk good. And that was probably one of their skills when they were, out there doing whatever it is they were doing. So moving on is, and that's why when I talk about the difference between honesty and telling the truth, truth is a verbal statement, and honesty being a verbal statement that's consistent with or that has a behavior that's consistent with that talking. So back to recovery. So how do people recover? Now, we talked about what is recovery. We talked about recovery and recovery from what? Now, how do people recover? And there's many ways to recovery. I'm just talking about the 12-step program because this is what I've been doing. This regimen is, I'm more consistent in recovery than I am at working. I'm saying the same job because I ain't never stopped working. But I've been in recovery for 34 years and 8 months. However, I've been on various jobs and relationships and so forth. So anyway, moving on and talking about the recovery process, it's like, how do the individual recovery? So I'm shooting this out at people, and not only people in the 12-step program, don't get me wrong, because if you want to listen to these videos, fine, please do, and make comments, and do all that. However, those of you that are in the 12-step programs, and I'm going to say this, I'm practicing anonymity on this. I'm not going to put one program over the other. I ain't going to say AA is better than NA is better than AA, CA is this and this and that. You know, we all basically have the same program that emanated from the 12-step of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they've been turned this way or turned that way. But basically, we got the same program. At the end of the day, when you turn off the lights, they are basically the same. Because why? Because spiritual principles are never in conflict. Show me a spiritual principle that's in conflict with another one. But religious principles will conflict. You know, a person said, if you don't believe in John 3:16, you ain't going to heaven. Some people believe in the rapture. Some people believe that, you know, you got to have a yoga master telling you, you know, advising you. Some people believe that you might have to take Kung Fu or Tang Soo Do, Judo or something. Some people believe in vegetarianism, and some people believe in just eating meat. So these principles, those type of principles can conflict with each other. But basic spiritual principles, for example, honesty is honesty, no matter where you go. Marriage is marriage wherever you go. Resentment, and I ain't saying resentment is a spiritual principle, but love, and we'll just take love. Love is love wherever you go. Whether you go to the church, to the mosque, to the Jewish synagogue, love is love. So that's a spiritual principle that it will never be in conflict. If I got married in Islam today and joined the church tomorrow, I don't have to get remarried. If I got married at the Jewish settlement and I became a Muslim, I ain't got to get remarried. Because marriage is marriage. It's a spiritual principle. The principles of marriage will never change, that I know of anyway. So spiritual principles are never in conflict. However, religious and philosophical principles are. So moving on with that, moving on. 12-step programs, and if you are affiliated with one, work the steps of that program, and then watch the transformation, and then pay attention to your calling, because from my experience and from the experience of others that I've seen, the message that we carry is spiritual in nature. And when I say we, I'm talking about 12-step fellowships. Because one thing as 12-step fellowships we've come to understand about addiction and what it is, alcoholism and what it is. And we also understand how to recover from that, or to recover from those addictions. So moving on, right? Recovery. What is recovery? Recovery from what? And so wrapping this thing up, I'm wrapping this thing up is that the name of my video is 12-Step Recovery. And this particular piece is going to be called What is Recovery? And recovery from what? So that's what this one is going to be called. I plan on putting out in a day at a time, another video tomorrow night, Sunday. I'll be planning on putting out another one. And then this video, I'll go it'll be 12-step recovery, and I'm going to talk about the serenity prayer. I'll be doing a breakdown of the serenity prayer, and then I'll be moving into step 1. I also talk about the atheists and the agnostics, and their place in our fellowship. And let me say this. When I came into the fellowship, I had a religion, but somebody reminded me, I think at my second or third meeting, when they asked me, they say, "Is this your religion right here?" And they said the name, and I said, "Yeah, that's my religion." And they said, "No, you ain't got no religion. Your religion is drugs and alcohol. Now you might be claiming that, but look at your behavior. What have your behavior said in the past 20 years?" And my behavior said drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling was my religion. That's right. Just like they say you are what you eat. You preach, you behave. That's what you are. That's what I believe. I know some of y'all might want to tell me some other stuff, but that's up to you, man. Men and women. But I'm a person in recovery, and recovery is is what I do. Now, wrapping this thing up, I am going somewhere with the recovery process, and I talked about pain body, light body. I'm going to be talking about energy, channeling energy, how energy is channeled through the 12-step process. And I like to say this, from my perspective of the 12 steps, we're not a secret society. We don't, and when I say we, can somebody, ain't none of the programs secret society or exclusive to anybody. What I've seen in this pandemic type thing, something that I never thought I would ever see, and that's meetings and meeting places and I'm talking about people making contact, shaking hands, hugging, and however it is we do, was gone. And then we had to go on Skype and Zoom and Google and have those types of meetings. You understand what I'm saying? What do we call the atmosphere of recovery was no longer. It changed the way we knew it. So I'm saying that to say this. Recovery went on a whole nother level. And I'm not putting that Zoom thing down. And I'm not putting Skype down. I ain't putting none of that down. We did what we had to do in order to recover. We took it the way we had to take it. And I say we as 12-step fellowships. But at the same time, I have to say this too. Recovery is going to another level. The different perspectives of recovery as a result of how the society is changing, our recovery is moving. It's progressive. Recovery is progressive. It is not passive. However, I'm experiencing recovery as an individual. This is what I'm talking about. When I lay my steps out, when I lay the program out, as I'm experiencing it, And then, or in my experiences and in my strengths and in my hopes. Yeah, I'm putting them out there like that. This is how me as an individual is experiencing recovery. And how I'm experiencing it right now is on different degrees on the spiritual level. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna talk about the Reiki. I'm gonna talk about the Kundalini. I'm gonna talk about the different phases of yoga that I'm experiencing, the energy that I'm experiencing, and it's a result of this program. I don't have no arguments on which program is what. If it's saving yourself, if it's saving your behind, that's where you belong. Something got you there. Because I know what I was trying to get me. I was trying to get me dead. Or in some type of jail, or in some type of institution. So I'm about to cut this thing off. I'll be posting another video. My goal is to establish my YouTube channel, talk about recovery, and go from there. My name is Suni. I'm in recovery, and I'm loving every minute of it. I'd like to thank y'all for listening to me. I'm gonna keep it going, and what I will do, I have it where you can post the comments in the bottom. Any questions that you might have, feel free to post them. And a lot of mine is gonna be live streaming until I learn how to edit and do thumbnails, which I got a suggestion on that today. But if you're in recovery and you're struggling to stay symptom free, you're doing the right thing. You're doing good. Keep coming back. Keep coming back. All right, I like to say thank y'all. Y'all are winners today. And we'll talk to y'all tomorrow. All right, thank you.